Obviously, I'm sure most people have heard, if not everybody, that we heard on Christmas Eve, actually, but it happened a couple days earlier, that Stephan Bonnar passed away, which was shocking, to say the least. I guess there's not a ton of details that have come up unless you have more, but I mean, basically what we've heard is that he basically had a heart attack at his employment on Thursday. And, I
It was Wednesday.
assume,
Wednesday.
was it Wednesday? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But was it Thursday he passed away or Wednesday?
No, it was Thursday. Sorry, I got my
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
I got my days all messed up.
Yeah, because you know what? Because Boxing Day was Saturday, but it feels like it was Friday.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get you. I totally I follow that. Yeah, because it was because we heard about it and it already happened, obviously. But and I mean, obviously, it was a shock to everyone. Nobody knew. Obviously, it wasn't. Say it was a sudden heart attack, I would assume, and 45 years old. Pretty. I would. My wife had a heart attack this year. And she's only 5 years older than that. But it's sad and sudden, and I know it hit you pretty hard. Given that you've been watching right from day one, and obviously you saw his whole career. So
Yeah, I mean, I was there at the Ultimate Fighter finale.
you were
The
there? Oh wow!
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I was going. Like I said, I've been going to Vegas since I was 18, but I was really 21 if you ask my ID. But but yeah, I was there, and yeah, I this one hit me really hard. Like I had a hard time sleeping Saturday night.
Wow.
When I found this out, because it reminded me of so much. I hate to kind of bring this up, and I know Stefan, he had he had some health issues the last couple of years that he's been very like public about. So who knows? Like he had a very bad staph infection at one point and was in the hospital for a while, and some other stuff going on. And then he recently lost his house in a fire, and was taking donations and like a little known. I don't know how public this story is. I know it's out there, but I don't know how many people know about. But Tyron Woodley actually bought him the new place that he was living in. So,
Oh
and
wow.
there was all that going on, and just yeah, and this, he's 45 years old, and it kind of it hit me hard because obviously I've been a big MMA fan, but as all of us are, a lot of us are pro wrestling fans, and it just reminded me of those days where guys we grew up watching were just dropping dead suddenly in their late 30s, early to mid 40s from heart attacks.
Mhm.
And you hate to bring up the elephant in the room, but yeah, Stephan Bonnar, he did have multiple drug test failures for steroids. He came up in his popularity in that era was big in that era of probably the heaviest steroid usage in MMA
Mhm.
times, when they were very rarely, when they were only really drug tested the night of the fight, and you kind of knew when it was coming, so you knew how to beat it. There was only random drug tests for main event fighters, and even then they weren't that random. You could kind of tell when they were coming. And then a lot of those guys got really famous really quick, and there was a lot of partying for a lot of those guys in that age. I've witnessed it firsthand. So I mean, I got firsthand knowledge of a lot of that stuff, and and the constant training, the constant it was the days of the heavy sparring era where your guys were sparring 6 7 days a week. Now it's like they maybe do it once a week. And yeah, so I mean, you can imagine, like, the head trauma, the body trauma, having to use painkillers to get through the day. It's those guys in those era, and we kind of see it with some people, the way they walk and talk from that era. You hate to say it, you hate to bring it up, but it's kind of like that elephant in the room that is there that you can't really overlook if you really want to do a deep dive into this situation. So I hope this isn't like the start of a trend from that era, but it's still it just sucks
Yeah.
because I have hanging in my room, I have the there was a portrait done of the Griffin Bonnar fight, and both Forrest and Stephan both signed it, and I have that hanging in my room, and it's just like, and so I obviously see that every day, and it sucks. Just this news sucks, and he was such a huge part of the boom of the UFC, or what I call the first boom, because I feel like they've had three boom
Yeah.
periods. So the first boom was, him and Forrest were a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I kind of missed out on that, but live as it was happening. But I certainly knew about it, and then as I got more and more into UFC, I became familiar with the history. I went back and watched most of it, and then like the last time I remember, last time I saw him fight was his last UFC fight. Well, I know I guess I saw the Tito fight too in Bellator, but I remember this was back in the era when I was still kind of picking and choosing pay-per-views, and I ended up buying this UFC 153 based on the promos that he was doing, which were the whole idea of the promos, and you can Google it and see it on YouTube, was him sitting down with Forrest and asking him for advice, and Forrest just basically telling him like, "You're fucked." And he's looking at the camera like he knew it, and they're showing highlights of Anderson Silva beating all these people, like front kicks and submissions and punches, and he's like, he's got nothing. Like anything he tries, Anderson's gonna beat him, and that was like the selling point of the show. And as it turned out, he lost in the first round by TKO, and then ended up failing a drug test afterwards, and was cut from the UFC after, which sucked. But they sold that fight to me based on that, and it was just so entertaining, and I didn't do it justice. Like, you have to watch it, and there was a few of them that were all similar. And then of course the show with this fight he did with Tito and Bellator, which is obviously way past his prime, but it was on Spike TV, and it did 1.2 million viewers in an era when Bellator was probably doing 700,000 or 800,000 for most of their shows, and their fight itself did 2 million viewers. So it was, I mean, he showed that he was still a TV star at that age, and that was 2014, so that's 8 years ago. He was 37, and I saw him wrestle as well in Vegas. I want to say like 2017 maybe, for
Yeah,
Future Stars of Wrestling. He did an angle where he came out and just attacked a couple people. I don't think I actually saw him have a match. He was still training, I think. But that's the last time I saw him. Was then. It was in that little gym that they tape in Vegas, and saw Tom Lawler and Antonio Thomas have a match on that same show, and
yeah,
he was on there as well.
yeah. He did some stuff with Impact Wrestling too
Yep.
during
Yep.
during that time, and yeah, of course, he's always going to be remembered for the Forrest Griffin fight, the fight that put the UFC on the map, and yeah, there's been a lot of like history coming out that everybody says that's the fight that made the UFC, and that it was the reason there's a season 2 of the Ultimate Fighter. Ultimate Fighter, it's a little bit revisionist history. They had announced season 2 during the show before the fight even happened, even though they didn't sign the contract for it until the next day. But season 2 is happening. But I do feel like that the Bonnar Griffin fight helped the big buy rate the next week for UFC 52, which had Chuck and Randy, their second fight,
Yep.
and it may. I don't know that. I still think season 2 of Ultimate Fighter would have still happened without it, but it made a feature for the UFC as far as like live fight nights on Spike TV, because at the time before that, there was no plans for that happening. And all of a sudden now you're getting Ultimate Fight Nights on a Spike TV, and then you're having these future subsequent seasons of Ultimate Fighter. So yeah, it's a big part of history, and it's if anybody who goes to UFC shows, they always show the Bob O'Reilly video, by the Who, mixed in with UFC highlights, and Griffin Bonnar is probably the centerpiece of that video. So it's the most important fight. It's the
Mhm.
most important fight in UFC history for sure. And and just, I mean, we're all here. We're all here as fans of today because of that fight, because it kickstarted so much.
Yeah, and he was, I mean, people, will kind of say, he maybe wasn't a great fighter and was just kind of had a great fight in the right place at the right time, but he fought John Jones in one of John Jones' first UFC fights and went the distance with him. And that was like one of the few times, early in Jones's UFC career where he had his debut where he went the distance, then he had this string of just finishes for like 6 straight fights. So, he was all right. Like he wasn't bad, but he obviously took a lot of punishment, in that Griffin fight, in the fight with with Rashad and the rematch with Forrest. And